I would like to call to order the public hearing for the 2024-2025 school budget. This meeting is being held in the Harvey Hearing Room on Monday, April 22nd. We are being televised live. May I have a roll call, please?
Yes. Ms. Leonard?
Yes.
Mr. Lettieri?
Yes. Here.
Mr. Martucci?
Yep.
Ms. Petrie?
Here.
Mr. Purinton?
Present.
Ms. Barry? And Ms. Powell?
Present. This is a public hearing for the intent of presenting our budget proposal for the 2024-2025 school budget. I don't believe that we will have, it is open for public comment, but we have nobody in the room. So can we please have a presentation of the budget, and then we can,
Sure.
Madam Chair.
Do we need to do the pledge?
Pledge first.
Oh, pledge.
yes. Sorry, it was under my general meeting. Mr. Lettieri, can you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I would like to have Ms. Howard present our budget proposal, and then we will be, as a committee, open for public hearing, for public comment. If not tonight, I would encourage people to submit comments.
Thank you. It is with great pride and pleasure that I present this budget to you this year, presenting two as we begin. With the months leading up to the budget development, they have been very challenging, to say the least, but the input, feedback, and collaboration of our school committee, community, staff members, families, and students has been extremely beneficial and quite helpful. As we're all aware, the town struggles with many of the same budget challenges that face communities across our entire state. The history of being held to the limitations of Proposition 2.5 has led our community to years, and 7 that I have been in existence, of budget allocations that have been level service budgets during times when the cost of public education certainly has exceeded the 2.5 rate increase that we are allowed to charge here in our community to get our revenue. So over the past 2 years, we've revised the budget development process to maximize our allocations by taking that ground level approach that we've spoken about so many times, beginning with looking at contractual obligations of staff and services, and then moving to the identification of the needs of each school building related to things such as staffing, facility maintenance, technology, curriculum, and of course, of utmost importance, the safety and well-being of our students. The administration has included key stakeholders throughout this process. We presented the school improvement plans to you all, and that is a big part of the development of our budget, along with our strategic plan and the goals that guide our school district. So after several months of preparation and work, tonight and on Thursday, I had provided you all in your packets with both a level service budget and a needs budget. Both budgets focus on our district priorities that, again, are articulated in our strategic plan and our school improvement plans. I can say that both budgets reflect our commitment and focus on high-quality teaching and learning, a foundation of equity, safety, adequate time in learning, and enhancing literacy for all of our students. That being said, there is a difference between the two budgets. So a level service budget, for folks who don't know what that means, is a budget that reflects a funding request that allows us to continue to fund everything that we're doing this year without adding anything, no new staff, no new programs. Of course, with year change, the cost of services and staffing goes up. The needs-based budget, I believe, affirms our commitment to what we're currently providing, and also reflects the additional staffing and programs that we believe our students are entitled to, and those that will allow them to exceed, in this case, our needs-based budget has additions in it, such as the new K-5 ELA and reading curriculum that will be launching and bringing more information to you in the coming weeks. It also includes maintaining class size within guidelines and within our commitment to the community. It has teaching positions added at all 4 schools. It also has, and this is just a summary, but some additional items at schools such as expanding middle school athletic teams to add softball and baseball, and some after-school programming, homework support clubs and the like, and expanding some funding areas in the area of facility maintenance. So my ultimate goal, obviously, in developing these budgets is to come up with a budget that advocates for our students and that ensures that we're providing them with the high-quality education and co-curricular programs that are equitable to meet the needs of every child. And I know you've heard a lot about that in our S3 focus over the last 2 years and then moving forward. The proposed needs-based budget also reflects our continued efforts to not only address our students' social emotional well-being, engagement in their own learning and improved MCAS scores, but also reflects our ongoing efforts and commitment to bring about program improvements and a broader opportunity for access to enhanced educational programming. So with all of that said, I did put in your packet a copy of 2 budgets. The budget that was presented to you, the format of the budget, you can see has dramatically changed in relation to the budget that has been in existence for, Mr. Martucci may know, but probably 20 years in terms of line items. I felt that it's been a goal of mine since becoming superintendent to really commit to a budget that is fully transparent and can show you the staffing, what the staffing looks like, the longevity and salaries that people have, where people are paid out of, whether it be the general local budget, which is funded by the town allocation, or whether we're utilizing outside accounts to fund salaries for people, such as grants or other revenue sources that we have, preschool tuition, the I-20, which is our international student account. That account has funds that are coming in for students from other countries who are paying to come to Winthrop Public Schools for either a semester or a full school year. And also I talked about the grants, so we have many of our salaries are embedded in grants. The Title I grant has quite a few salaries. The Special Education 240 grant has quite a few salaries. And for the past 3 years, the COVID funding called ESSER 3 grant funding that we had, it was a total of $3 million over a 3-year time frame. That's a lot of money for a school district the size of Winthrop. And we took a very strategic approach to using that money during COVID. The fair majority of that money has gone for building improvements across the district, as well as technology improvements. And less of that money has been allocated towards salaries. However, on average over the past 3 years, about $550,000 worth of that funding per year has been allocated to pay salaries. The goal of that funding was to mitigate, one of the goals was to help mitigate learning loss in communities for our kids after they had been out of school for so long. And the way we dealt with that was having salaries that were related to nursing services, which became a much larger issue than ever before, so we added a nurse. We looked at our class size at the elementary levels, and we had added a first grade teacher and a second grade teacher to lower class size when kids returned back to in-person learning from COVID. We wanted the smallest class size we could possibly have. We also added specialists at the Gorman-Fort Banks and the Arthur T. Cummings. One was a science specialist, again, to give kids more in-person, smaller group active learning environments. And then at the Cummings School, we added an SEL, social emotional learning teacher, which was I say very critical when our kids came back, to have a daily, full class, paying attention to all the struggles that students had going on when they were at home learning that certainly have carried over. So that funding is coming to a close and needs to be fully expended by the end of September of 2024, which is a pretty big hit to our district because of the one-time expenditures that we spent it on, gave us an awful lot that we wouldn't have had if we didn't have that money. Things that we would have had to go either back to the town for or included in our budget. That had a lot to do with filtration systems in our schools, adding technology, fixing windows, and I can provide the committee with a summary of the ESSER 3 funding, which we intended to do this summer anyway, so you could see how all of that money spent. But the funding is coming to an end. What's not coming to an end is the needs of our kids. So 3 years of funding, definitely was a blessing, but the impact of COVID is lasting certainly well beyond 3 years. So with the new budget document that you have, as you can see, you have a snapshot of the full totality of what the new budget document can do. And I printed out the actual line items by school and salaries by school for everyone. There is much more detail to that budget, I guess you call it a platform, and what it can do in terms of accuracy of the budget. So I put together a level service budget for you, and then added to that the needs budget more in a narrative so that you don't have 2 full sets of budget. You have one budget, and then you can see what the additional expenses would be. So I can walk you through that as painlessly as I can. And I will start with this slide. So, again, in doing this whole new budget process, one of my goals was to make this understandable to the average person so that people could really get a much better snapshot than looking at a 52-page budget with, 700 line items in it and try to figure out how we spend our money. So I wanted to give you just a quick overall comparison of a level service budget, a quick overall comparison of the needs budget. And the comparison I'm using is this current school year, how we spend our money, to next school year. And I'll get a little more detailed in the end and show it to you by school. But overall, in the Winthrop Public Schools in the 23-24 school year, which is this year, of our complete budget, which was $35,209,053, of that full amount, $21,216,302 is spent on salaries. That's salaries for everybody. Teachers, ESPs, custodians, substitutes, lunch workers, anyone you can think of that gets a paycheck. Then schools have expenses. So schools are made up of salaries and expenses primarily. So we have expenses. Expenses are everything that is not a salary. So paper, pencils, copy machines, contracts with vendors that we have to provide services for the school. This year we have $4,784,411 in expenses. If you remember last year, the town manager came to us and informed us of the his new design of how to allocate funds to all the departments in the town based on the total amount of revenue that the town of Winthrop gets. And he asked that we take other expenses which were traditionally on the town side and not incorporated or ever reflected in the school's budget, and put those into our school budget for a sense of transparency to the community, and also to give everybody a real accurate reflection on what the true cost to run a public school is. And so that category of expenses was a whole group of expenses that the school district never really had control over in terms of monitoring or funding. So it always sat on the town side. So as part of the town's new process of allocating funds to the school, they asked that we shifted those line items for transparency into the school's budget. And we did that. Just for general sense of what those are, school group insurance, school Medicare, school workman's comp, school unemployment, school pensions for retirees, school property insurance for all of our properties, educator liability insurance, school flood insurance, school public official liability, payroll, and that's the payroll platform that the town and the schools use, school retiree health insurance, and then two other categories, school debt service, which is the principal construction debt we owe on the school builds, and then the school debt service interest, which is the last category. Those are all the categories that you see are the other expenses. That's $9,208,340 worth of expenses. In this current school year budget, those line items with the allocation of those funds were provided to the school directly with the amounts, for the sole purpose of, we would never know what those were because we never managed them before. So when you take the salaries, and you take the expenses, and you take the other expenses, which are the categories I just described to you, those three total up to the $35,209,053 that it costs to run the public schools. What was missing and has been missing in the past, and gets much more clear in this new budget that you have, is the other salaries that we pay staff in the public school to run the public school. And this current year, we have $1,878,338 worth of salaries that are being charged to grants or outside revenue accounts like I-20 or preschool tuition. So when you add that to the 35 million, you have actually the true cost to run the Winthrop Public Schools. This year, in 24-25, if we were to keep everything we had, not cut anything, including the positions that were funded by ESSER funds that are now gone, and we added the contractual increases, so teachers, all of our 7 unions, their collective bargaining agreements landed from 2022, so 2022 to 2025, a 3-year budget, a 3-year contract, at a 2% raise for each year, for each particular group. With teachers, teachers also have steps and lanes, so if teachers have any movement, we have 8 steps that teachers can rise, and we have, I think, 5 or 6 lanes, and you move a lane if you gain a higher degree status. So those are also included in the total increase of salaries. So if you look at 24-25, and then I'll jump over to each school and show you how that looks in a minute, but if you look at 24-25, the salary predictions for, and we did this body by body, so this includes teachers, custodial staff, lunch staff, anybody who gets a paycheck in Winthrop. The total increase just for salaries alone is $1,014,323. And again, that includes steps and lanes for teachers and 2% across the board for all other members. Expenses have increased by $884,805. And I'll talk about the drivers of those expenses, why they have gone up at that level. And that, again, that's paper, pencils, curriculum platforms, furniture for the schools, copier machine contracts, anything that is not a salary. And then the other expenses, again, go back to those categories I talked about that came over to the school district this school year as an accounting shift. That's the liability insurance, school health insurance, retiree health insurance. That was a large increase, $526,107. That increase is that high because health care insurance for current employees and retiree employees who get health care, that increase was 9.5%, just on those 2 categories of those 10 items that I explained before. The other items were approximately a 5% increase. Anything that wasn't health care, such as educator liability, flood insurance, public official liability, school unemployment, workman's comp, Those all went up at an average of 5%. And then if you look at the grant and revenue offset, this is a good thing. So last year, this current year, we used 1,878,000 and change in grant offsets, providing salaries just out of specific grants. Next year, we plan to use $3,211,000 and change, utilizing grants and other revenues. So we're at a point where, because of the increase in cost and because of what we're expecting from the town, any outside revenue accounts that we have, we really need to flatten those, which leaves no room for error. So all of the income in preschool tuitions that come in, anything we can take out of I-20 students that come in, instead of having any of that money left over, we really need to dig into that and take as much of it as we can to fund the school year's budget. So that's where that large increase comes from. So in total, if you add the salaries, the expenses, and the other expenses, you come to $37,634,288, which is a $2.4 million increase from this current school year to next school year. You do not add the grants to that number because the grants are paid out of a separate source. So when we're looking at the money we need from the town to fund the school district, it's the $37,634,288 for a level service budget. Similar process with the needs budget. I show you this current school year's budget, and then I show you, if we add all the needs, which I'll touch on in a minute, what that would look like. So for a level service budget, you were looking at a little over $1 million in increase. For a needs budget, you're looking at $2 million. The expenses climb up a little. We were conservative with our expenses, but there's some things that we still don't know yet, and some things we do know, which I'll go into in 1 second. Our expenses, other expenses in terms of those town line items, those are gonna stay the same because we don't need more for those because they're actual numbers, so we have a prediction of what they're gonna be, and we wouldn't raise that prediction just to raise it. Those are pretty spot on. And the grant and revenue that we expect to utilize stays the same too, because we haven't had any new grants or any new revenue. If it was out there, it would be included in the level service budget as well. So overall, a needs-based budget, which is what we believe administration and everybody who's had input into this budget is what our students need. And I think it's our job to advocate strongly for that, and I'll detail that in a minute. That's an increase of $3,525,217. So I think it's important to know when you have these two budgets in front of you. First and foremost, anytime anything goes up, any cost of anything goes up, you want to know the why. And so what are the budget drivers? What do we know right now? And what did we know, and what do we still know right now in terms of why these things have gone up, the costs have gone up. So we know we're coming to the end of being able to maintain staffing and services with budgets that have been level funded. We're starting to dry up because each year that gap gets wider and wider. The transparency, to transparently reflect the true cost of the public school, we knew that as of 23-24, that we were now going to be absorbing the cost from the town for the retiree insurance, workman's comp, debt service. We knew that we were going to reflect those in our budget. That's what we knew, and they are reflected in our budget. We knew that the town was planning to fund the school department with approximately 60% of the full revenue. We found that out last year, and we still know that this year. We also knew that staff contracts were going to increase by 2%. So when we're planning this budget, we also know, on top of that, that teachers have the ability to change lanes by bettering themselves and getting a higher degree status. We put something into place to make that budget friendly, which means that by March 1st, teachers have to prove to us that they have the ability to change a lane, and they have to request it in writing, and we have to approve it. Doesn't mean they have to achieve it. They just have to show us that they intend to do it and have the ability to do it. And what that does to the budget is if a teacher is in a bachelor's lane and is moving to a master's lane, in the new budget, the proposed budget, we put the master's degree figure in there because it's attainable. So if they don't attain it, there'll be some savings. If they do attain it, we have the correct figure in there, and we don't have to come back looking for a supplemental budget. What we also knew is that the ESSER and any COVID-related funding that's been available for the past 3 years is coming to an end, and that was incorporated into the planning of this budget. We also know, based on the work that we do at the ground level, that special education and general transportation costs were rising at a rate well above 2.5%. The data to support that is a listserv that I have been on with the school, with other school superintendents, and transportation has been a big budget item across the Commonwealth. On average, transportation has increased 10% from vendors in 1 year. And why it's increased 10% in 1 year? Because people are desperate for transportation to out-of-district schools, as well as, fortunate for us, we don't have public school buses that we're paying for. However, other schools do, so they're seeing the major hit on that. Vocational schools are seeing a hit on that. Agricultural schools are seeing a hit on that, and they're reflecting that as well in their budgets. Another thing we knew is that our ML and non-English speaking student population has increased significantly. That increasing enrollment of students who are entering this country for the first time is very high. I certainly can have Laurie bring those numbers to you. I think we've talked about them in the past. We've had over 75 students move into the district this year who have moved to this country for the first time. Some have stayed, some have left. It's sort of a moving target. A lot of times families come here and double up with another family and then, eventually find permanent housing that may or may not be in Winthrop. So those numbers are constantly moving. With that particular change in our community, the impact of the school certainly has been significant because we need to educate all students, and providing these students with the mandatory EL services that we are required to provide them with. That is something that we absolutely have to do, and that means more EL teachers in our school district, which we have added this year and plan to add more for next year. And then, the cost of materials, supplies, vendor contracts, they're rising above a 2.5% tax levy every year. That's no surprise to anybody. That's been going on for quite some time, but it's getting to the point of difficult, to keep up with. So I just took and put each school for you so you could see it in this way, in terms of what their requests look like at a level service and what their requests look like at a needs base, so you can see the difference between the two. But I think most importantly is with the needs-based rising, because like I said, level service is everything we have this year and nothing more. The needs-based is we're asking for more, and so you need to know what that more is per building. I provided in your packet a spreadsheet with minimalistic explanation of why we need these things, but I think you've all had time to go through that. I think it's important to know the why, and I'm grateful that the committee has asked for that level of detail, and you had that in your packet. It would be in the very back on a spreadsheet after the tab or cover page of needs-based summary explanation, I think. So at the Gorman Fort Bank School, we've already talked earlier about what the total cost for level service and total cost for the needs-based budget would be in terms of increases. But when you're talking about the needs, that higher level increase is because they are asking for, and I want to preface their asks with, they've become accustomed to asking every year for, and advocating for what students need. And they've become accustomed to not ever achieving that, at least, and I'll speak of the past at least 6 years of the budgets that I've developed, or I think this might be my 7th, but, and it gets very frustrating. But I think at the core of everything that we do as educators, they believe that the story needs to be told, and they believe they need to continue to advocate for it. This list from each school could be 25 pages each, but we want to be realistic in terms of what we believe we need and we believe that would be achievable at some point. So the Fort Banks, the increased level service, increased needs-based budget includes an additional ML teacher, an additional reading teacher, a .5 math lead teacher, teacher stipends for the S3 Educating All Student program that we've been working on, and then funding of summer programming. ESSER 3 has funded summer programming for the last 3 years in a row, fully funded it. For summer programming, the Gorman Fort Bank School, the Arthur T. Cummings School, the middle school, and has paid 50% of the special education's extended year program. So that's pretty impactful when you think about that money being available to fund that. Had that money not been there, we would have been asking for the significant amount of money for these programs 3 years ago, or at least 2. Cummings School, again, a sidewalk of the level service budget versus the needs budget, and you can see, when you're looking at these increases in the column that says increase or decrease, that increase or decrease is based on this year compared to the level service, or this year compared to the needs base, if that makes sense. So at the Cummings School, again, back to the ML / ELL teacher, a reading teacher, they're rolling out, they have rolled out IM math, and they're so involved in it and seeing such great results. They are looking for a math teacher in that building to be full-time, and they're also looking for an individual stipend for somebody to be either a .5 additional math lead or a stipend for teachers to be able to go in and work with other teachers and look at best practice and see what's working based on their data, especially in classrooms where there's been significant improvement in reading scores. Before and after school support, with our tight schedules of drop-off and pickup, and I guess I don't have to speak about the traffic, probably because it's not raining out right now, it's not high tide, but the traffic is pretty heavy. It's tight getting kids to school in between the elementary schools, and our time staggering is difficult because it limits our common planning time when we start to really stagger grade levels in a building. We have been providing before school programming and some after-school support from Bell to parent pickup, and that's been funded through ESSER funding as well. And again, every school you'll see the S3 stipends. Just a quick glance at the middle school, which I'm sure you've all seen in the packet that I gave you. Brian Curley may be the longest standing, he may have the longest standing request of all the teachers in the past 7 years as it relates to social studies. He's asked for a band teacher. He's asked for, it says a 7B specialist, it's actually 1 grade 7 specialist. He wants to expand the number of specials that the students have. He wants to add Spanish back. However, his parent surveys and input from the work he's done around his school improvement plan, people have been heavily supportive of the health class, the health and wellness class that took place of the Spanish class when we couldn't find a Spanish teacher. And he strongly feels that he needs both, and the parents have also supported that. Again, he has 1 ML teacher for his entire building, where the other schools each have, the elementary schools each have 2. He has 1. He has the numbers and the need for an additional 1 to keep class size small and to have students in groups of 5 to 7 as opposed to 12 to 15. Once again, for the 10th year in a row, he's asked for a 6th grade social studies, certified social studies teacher and a 7th grade certified social studies teacher. I don't think repeating the explanation for that need is necessary. Bathroom monitors, some people may think that's an odd thing. We don't. Middle school kids have a tendency to do things in the bathroom and fool around and be silly, which creates issues. He's looking at it from a social, emotional, and behavioral management perspective. And so that can come in the form of, you'll see in the budget, I believe the line item was a $15,000 increase. That's part-time people just coming in and be able to add support. S3 and SST stipends. S3 we talked about, but SST is the student support system that he's currently using. And he has a grade level teacher from grade 6, 7, and 8 that sit in on meetings where he has the adjustment counselors, school resource officer, and a bunch of other people that do a lot of work around management of middle school behavior and how middle school kids interact with each other. Some restorative justice programming that he's doing. So currently, we don't pay the teachers to do that work. They volunteer to stay an awful lot after school to have those round tables. Middle school intramurals, homework zone stipends, those have been paid out of ESSER 3, and prior to that were paid out of, I believe, Title 3. Title 3 is now being used for other gaps that we've had, and ESSER 3 will be gone, so he's looking for that. And he would like to add, he's finding that middle school extracurriculars, and in this case, his need is in the area of athletics. The kids are asking for a baseball and a boys' baseball team and an equivalent team for our girls' softball team at the middle school level. And so he was looking for money to offset. There's a user fee for that, but there's transportation involved because we want the kids to be able to play other teams. Winthrop High School, same sidewalk. Again, band, we having all the band equipment that we have and not having a band has been difficult for us. Financial literacy teacher and a medical careers teacher, and Matt wanted me to be really clear that the financial literacy teacher, we had CASA come in this year and do, out of the ESSER 3 grant, they did a diversion program, and they also did financial literacy and student support for kids building resumes and ninth grade, some ninth grade orientation work. We find that to be, and our kids have found that to be extremely helpful to them. They loved the financial literacy piece. A lot of kids took advantage of it. And medical careers is a course that we used to have here years ago. This is, speaking to pathways, additional pathways for students. And, it was an ask a few years ago. There's a high interest with our students. Our preschool classroom at the high school is just laden with people trying to get in there to work with kids who want to go in the field of education. We have our life skills program there, where we have students that come in as mentors and take that classroom activity and work as a course. Mr. Crombie feels very strongly that we really do need to expand our career opportunities for our students, and the financial literacy and medical careers class, both of those could give our kids another avenue. The S3 stipends, and he'd like to continue the work with CASA. CASA is funded by grant only. We support them through a grant to have them come in and interact. That's the community engagement, and we have seen a definite change. CASA used to be a place where kids would not go because they felt it was stigmatizing. It's now within the school and as part of the school, and that stigma over a period of the last 3 years has really disappeared, and kids are reaching out and taking advantage of that. So, central office, which is upstairs here, we have asked for nothing but contractual increases in the central office, and have actually cut back a few of our lines. And then district-wide. So district-wide is for services that are not necessarily tied to a specific school all day long. So for instance, the pupil personnel director is a district-wide personnel because she services all 4 schools. And so district-wide needs, what we've recognized a need for is two additional ABA support staff to go to different buildings and to be able to do behavioral assessments on students, no matter where they are and what school, and to work with those students if needed. Occupational therapists, our caseloads are through the roof. They're over 30 per occupational therapist right now, which is teetering on not manageable, but we're still trying to work with that. Our English class for families has been super successful. Again, that's been paid out of ESSER 3. Safety and security camera and upgrades. So we had Lantel, who does all of the security cameras in the district. They did an evaluation for us, which I'll give to you at the next school committee meeting, of the needs of the camera systems. ESSER 3 paid for a ton of improvements. There is still some work to be done. We are certainly, in the meantime, seeking out other grants for that. Custodial service and supplies, we're always over. Always, always over. Extraordinary maintenance, you know, people say, oh, you have brand-new buildings. The Gorman Fort Banks and the Arthur T. Cummings School are not new. I don't know why people keep saying they're new. They're not. They're aging buildings. They're new compared to some schools in Boston Public Schools, but they are certainly not new compared to the middle school or the high school. So we have some aging problems there. I think we have done a ton with the ESSER funds that we had, a lot of one-time funding in each one of those buildings. Again, I'll share that information with you. We still have work to do for upkeep in those buildings. And we have a facilities manager who has given us a pretty good indication of what those needs are. And then Miller Field maintenance, we have a very small line item for the maintenance of Miller Field, which is utilized not only for the schools, but, you know, town athletics uses it, Parks and Rec use it on occasion, and some of our nonprofits in town use it. That is, how old is Miller Field, Jim? 6?
7 years old.
7 years old. So the lifespan of the turf is typically 8 years old. Turf is about $800,000 to redo the turf at Miller Field, approximately, from what I've been told by those experts. Fortunately, we have not put enough cleats on the field, and certainly during COVID, that saved us some wear and tear. But there's also other wear and tear, and, you know, one thing we want to do with the new facility is to continue the upkeep and continue to, you know, to keep it a place that is nice and not wait until it's too late to fix it. So we've put some additional funding in there. And then, I'll stop talking in a minute, just giving you sort of a broad view of the full sidewalk of a level service budget and a needs-based budget. I explained to somebody today that I've thought a lot about, you know, the school budget, like the time we've put into it, how much it takes to put it together, the thought of every line item. And to be able to sit down and talk to somebody about a school budget in a 15-minute or a 2-hour or a 3-hour timeframe is not possible. And it is an overwhelming amount of money. It's, you know, if you look at the needs-based true cost of a needs-based budget, or the true cost, full cost to run the Winthrop Public Schools on a level service budget, they're both $40 million plus. That's a lot of stuff. That's a lot of people. And to fully explain every inch of the school district's budget would take days on end. I, for one, am willing to do that based on the work that we have done with this budget. With anyone who would like to sit and listen, and I beg the questions in the budget. Can't answer every single one of them off the top of my head, but I'm pretty close. So, all said and done, I will state that as the superintendent, I am advocating for the committee and for the town to support the needs-based budget of the students of the Winthrop Public Schools. I believe that it is the way that our students will be able to achieve an education equitable to peers in other communities, and to give them the best shot at accessing and having access to the same things that most other kids have. I'll entertain any questions you have. I hope you understood me.
Keeping in mind that we will be having a discussion on the budget and a vote later, are there any questions from the committee at this point?
I just want to take the time to thank Lisa and Dylan and the staff this is an incredibly intense and detailed budget process. You know, the cost of education is high, and it's well worth it. This doesn't even count, you know, an additional $1.5 million that the town spends for the vocational school and Essex Tech, which is an addition, which is on the town side. You know, people, there obviously needs to be a discussion about budgets more in depth, and I wish people would get more involved, trying to understand the budget. You know, people look at user fees, which I hate user fees, and I wish they were zero, but people think, for example, a user fee pays for athletics. User fee doesn't pay for probably 25-30% of athletics.
Or more.
So there's so much cost, and to break it down in this much detail is fantastic. You know, to really understand the budget. Now, you know, on the plus side, you hope that there's some additional state aid that's coming in. I know they're still talking about that, but, you know, it's very eye-opening, and people need to take a look at this and see. And we were incredibly, as much as, you know, the schools did use some of the ESSER money for reoccurring expenses, the percentage was low compared to the vast majority of other communities. And I think people will see that when they start hearing more conversations about other cities and towns. So in some way, the prudent financial management we had is a huge asset. However, we're still in a hole. And we have to figure out the best way to maintain proper education for our kids. But I do thank you for this, and look for, I have a ton of questions, but we'll do them a little later.
Any other questions at this point?
I can just add to the thanks. Areli Davis, Areli was the secretary at the Cummings School last year. Areli speaks English, Spanish, I believe she can speak some Portuguese. She became our student system information management lead because we're moving to Power School, and it takes a full year to do that transfer. Without her hand and her computer savviness, I don't know where I'd be. And so she was doing her full-time job and taking calls from me and building this budget platform. And Mikkel Filipko, who is our facilities manager, who's also boss at Excel, also stepped up. And it's just the way things get done in Winthrop, and I think that's so important for people to understand that we have stepped it up a lot. And, you know, the strategic planning of the use of ESSER funds, which this entire community was involved in creating the use of those funds with guidance, that was a big plus to the district, to not embed salaries and you know, cost increases for collective bargaining agreements into the ESSER fund, because that's a funding cliff similar to that of 2006, which many of us lived. So just that extra thanks to those folks, and Laurie Gallivan as well.
That is much appreciated. Thank you also for your incredible diligence and volumes of information. I know that this, in particular, revamping this year has been extra time consuming.
It's like a sport to me. It was like a sport, which we all know, just give me a competition and I'm in, but this was a passion for whoever takes it after me. Yeah, I have stake in the game now, and I'll have stake in the game when I leave. So I'm hoping that, you know, this stays in place and can only be improved as we move forward to help us be able to forecast effectively and plan fiscally responsible.
And again, I encourage public comment to us, to the town council on this. I know that this is a lot for the public to digest, and there will be opportunities for that comment to come into play. And with that, I will adjourn the public hearing and open the regular meeting, and I believe we've already had the Pledge of Allegiance, so that is covered, but can we have a second roll call, please, for this meeting?
Yes, I can put on my other hat and do my other job. Ms. Leonard? Yes. Mr. Lettieri?
Yeah.
Mr. Martucci? Ms. Petrie? Mr. Purinton? Ms. Barry? And Ms. Powell?
Present. This will be our opportunity for public comment, but we have no one live to make comment, and we have no visitors this evening. However, could I have a motion to approve the minutes of April 28th, 2024?
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Petrie, second by Mr. Purinton. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstention.
And one abstention? Motion passes. May I have a motion to approve warrant SVW 24-17 in the amount of $324,730.39?
Motion.
Second. Motion by Mr. Puritan, second by Ms. Petrie. May I have a roll call, please?
Yes. Ms. Leonard?
Yes.
I have to check it off on the right page here. Mr. Lettieri?
Yes.
Mr. Martucci?
Yes.
Ms. Petrie?
Yes.
Mr. Puritan?
Yes.
Ms. Barry's not here. Ms. Powell?
Yes. We have no buildings and grounds tonight. We do, however, have a budget subcommittee.
We do. We had one of our budget subcommittees on last Thursday at the superintendent's office, present with myself, Lane, and Lisa Howard. The topics, of course, was the 2024 budget. We had one vote, and that was to present to the town, we need a full vote of the committee tonight if we could, the needs-based budget, which is $38,734,270. If we get a motion in a second,
Motion for 38,734,
270.
270. And how many cents?
Zero.
Okay, may I have a motion to approve a budget of $38,734, $38,734,270 and no cents?
Motion. Second.
Motion by Ms. Petrie, second by Ms. Leonard. Discussion.
Yes.
Yes, please, Mr.
I
Lettieri.
just want to also say to Lisa, when, Lisa talked about level service, the superintendent talked about level service and how that's basically giving you the same, which it is, but, and Lisa knows also that the state has certain mandates, right? And we have to add these mandates if we have the money or not, basically, right?
Correct.
So when you talked about, a lot of non-English speaking students and having the need to add more teachers, that's not an option, that's a mandate, right? So there are a number of mandates that, again, the state doesn't fund, but we have to supply. We're happy to do so, but I mean, it comes at a cost, right? I think that that's important to know. I think it's, also important to understand the town's position as to, the amount of available resources, right? We'd love to give an extra 2.8 million, but A, we don't have it, and B, where's it gonna come from, at what cost? I think it's hard to do a budget like this now. I know the town manager changed this last year, which I think is more representative, it's more transparent, it lets people understand full cost of education. But when you have, health insurance go up basically 10% in a year, and you have $3.7 million in health insurance expenses, and plus retirees' health insurance expenses, and you're looking at, $500,000 just there, basically, and the allotment in additional revenue is $800,000, you're in a problem. And again, I think as bleak as it looks, we're incredibly fortunate to have had some really good management and financial assistance over these past few years, so, you have to pass a budget, right? You have to have some sort of passage, you have to also be somewhat realistic in expectations from available funds, but there also has to be that conversation that we have to get citizens involved to see how we're going to address these deficiencies, because they are now structural deficiencies, they are not like made-up deficiencies, they are not like pie-in-the-sky deficiencies. Needs might be a little more, hey, this is what they deserve, but level service is not pie-in-the-sky. Level service is giving them what they had now, and, when we just built a brand-new middle high school 8 years ago or so, and we spent almost $200 and something thousand on band equipment, and we don't use it because we don't have the money to have a band department. It hurts. It's, school is a full experience. It's not just, although it's incredibly important, you have math and science and English and such, but that's not it. It's an experience, and we should be able to afford our kids the same experience that kids that came before them can. So this is a much wider conversation than just us. I 100% agree with Chairperson's discussion about getting the public involved, getting them come to not only school committee meetings, but also town council meetings. And, you know, it was discussed at the spring forum, which we had, that we have structural deficiencies now, and we need to address them. I mean, nobody wants to talk about it, but the fact of the matter is, it's been 15 years since we even, you know, talked about an override. Now, is this the budget that it's needed for? I don't know, but when you look at most cities and towns, you know, they're looking at this type of stuff on a reoccurring basis every 5 to 7 years. And you just, you know, it's like Miller Field, it's the same kind of thing. You don't wait until year 8 and then say, oh, we need 800,000. You slowly add it, and it's the same thing as, you know, when people go to buy milk, it goes up 10 cents every, whatever, month. It doesn't go up, doesn't stay at one price, and then all of a sudden, 15 years later, triple, because that's just so difficult for the consumer to handle. So we need to have some sort of reoccurring look at this. I also think we need to start an education stabilization fund to help with some of these items, and especially on the capital side. You know, it's just a holistic approach, and again, I applaud the superintendent and her team for their work on this budget. It's more detailed than I've seen in 20 years on a budget, and I thank them for that. But it's one thing to know all the information, it's another thing, you know, it's one thing to know the information, to say, yeah, vote yes, we need a needs-based budget, but it can't stop there, because that does not do the students service. It's great for them to know that we wish that they had you know, the materials and the needs that they really need, but it's one thing for us to wish that, it's another thing for us to do something about it. And can't do it alone, we need help, but it's a little discouraging when you're presenting a $40 million budget and there's nobody here. So I hope to have more input from the community. You know, I thank the chair and really the superintendent for the work she's put in. We just need to get more people aware of this
May
situation.
13th, no, May 16th, I'll be presenting to the FinCom, so for the public. If they would like to show up at that, certainly, you know, reach out. It's going to be here in the Harvey Room. And prior to that, if anyone wants to reach out for
The
more
FinCom
information.
meetings are a little less formal maybe, and better opportunity maybe to get into the nuts and bolts of a budget or any specific item. FinCom meets every Thursday until this budget is passed with every department head, or every department head that wishes to come before it. But the schools is always it's just their show for that night. That's the only department the FinCom would have in, and they will get into in-depth discussions. Again, the town votes on a bottom line budget for the schools. The town, it's not really technically the town's responsibility to say, you know, you gotta save money, you gotta put more money into training, or you know, but they do. They get involved in this, and Lisa understands that there's been some people on that board for a long time with a lot of experience and a lot of ideas, and they know their stuff, and they will ask the tough questions, and Lisa will give the right answers, and that's all you can ask for. So I encourage people to come.
I have a couple comments and then some questions, and some of them are process questions. The first is just a hearty thank you. I know this has been a ton of work, and I really appreciate it, and I really appreciated the detailed breakdown of the differences in what the needs-based budget could actually get us, right?
Sure.
Those very final pages. Just as a reminder, what is it's not even that much money, what is the $1 million difference between the needs-based and the level services and the needs-based?
What is the $1 million difference?
Yes, like how many $1 million more is it for the needs-based?
Hold on, I can tell you.
Than the,
So needs-based budget, the increase from this
2.8.
year to next year is, overall increase is $2,812,467.
okay,
That's for the needs-based budget. The increase for a level service budget from this year to next year is, oh no, Jim, am I wrong?
No, that's the deficit.
Oh, sorry, that's the
Based on the
deficit,
town,
sorry.
so it's
I've
that
been focused
plus
on that red number,
800,000.
yeah, so, no,
So
hold on.
Needs-based would be
Yeah, it's
3.4.
3, so,
it's $1.1 million difference?
no, the
No.
increase from this year to next year for a needs-based budget is $3,525,217. And I have it highlighted, I don't know why I was focused
That's
on
from
the
this
red.
year to, last year to this year, but what she's asking is the difference between the needs and
Level service.
the
And the level service is the
1.1.
staffing, so it's that needs-based sheet you see, that summary sheet you see on the end, if you add up all of those figures, that's what would take you to that $1 million
It's,
increase.
and I think it's about 1.1 in between, because the deficit between a level service budget is $1.7 million.
Right.
From what the town's gonna allocate to what
Correct.
the level service budget is, it's still a $1.712 million deficit.
And then.
Level service is 2.8 and change, so it's about a $1.1 million difference between level service and needs-based.
I wasn't understanding
That's
your
okay.
question,
No,
so
no,
I've
no,
got it
thank
now.
you. That's sort of what I was clarifying. So
Yeah.
I guess my sort of observation and then question to the committee is, we have a pretty big deficit. It's not that much bigger in some ways to actually do something like, to really get our schools in a position that we want to. And again, I thank you. I think those are really specific recommendations and things that we can sort of put our, kind of put our energy behind advocating for. So I guess my question is now a process one, which is, it seems to me somewhat incumbent on our committee to get the word out about this. I mean, to be honest with you, I knew we were having a budget meeting because I'm on this committee,
Yep.
right? I guess what I'm just wondering is, at what point do we sort of sound the alarm bell that we're in a pretty serious financial situation
Sure.
regardless?
It's a great
Actually,
question, that's a great
of
question.
Which one we were to go with. I mean, my inclination is that we're going to vote for the needs-based budget, because in my previous 3 years on the committee, we always do, and then we never get it. But what I'm hearing, if I'm hearing correctly, is even if we get the level services budget, we still can't afford it.
So that's factually, if we were in the moment and we were to open schools tomorrow, and we had to have this money by tomorrow, you would be absolutely correct. So prior to you guys coming in here, when I was sitting down here, getting myself set up in the space and just trying to think, I anticipated a question about, is it time for an override right now? Or how are you gonna close the gap in the meantime? So I can't answer I can answer the question. I don't think in this moment that I would say we need to have an override today to get through next year, and I'm gonna tell you why. We need time, a little bit more time to evaluate the end of the school year. I think it's important for people to know that a school's budget is a moving target. It's not sneaky, it's not tricky, it's actually very transparent. It is a moving target, and there are many factors that create that moving target, from special education, to student enrollment, to contracts and services that we have, to things that we end with people, to things that come in less than we thought they were gonna be, or more than they thought they were gonna be. So our budget, end of the year budget, starts right about now into the next, 6 to 8 weeks of taking every single account we have and every dollar we have in our budget, and looking at those line items and saying, we have encumbered 50,000 for this, are we actually going to use that full 50,000? If the answer to that is no, then we need to start adjusting that and moving that money to cover other places where we're over. For example, extraordinary maintenance. Some of those line items are over, and we have to rectify those line items and make sure we cover those costs. So that's one piece of it. So we need a little bit more time over the next few weeks to really reevaluate and close out the FY '24 budget and see where we land. We also, as part of that process, need to be able to accurately determine how much money of circuit breaker reimbursement is going to be available to put towards the FY '25 budget. And again, that's a moving target, because we have kids coming and going. Sometimes costs are less than if a student leaves a little bit early. We also have a couple of pending cases on students who may or may not go out of district, who are in and reflected in the FY '25 budget. But if that case closes within the next 6 or 8 weeks to the good, and the child's not going out, then that comes out of tuition, and that will lower that 1.7 deficit. We have to continue, as Laurie and Kathy Del Vento and I are doing on the daily, we have to continue to evaluate the grants that are available out there. There's only so much time in the day, but it is something that we are focused on. Looking at if the state is gonna provide more grant opportunities, and sometimes on a Tuesday, something will just pop up, and it can be upwards of, $150,000, $200,000. That would lower that potential deficit. Also assess any type of turnover cost that we anticipate. As you know, we have I think 5 retirements that all happen to be high-level positions. However, you know, people may not be coming back next year. So if somebody who is a master's 45, step 8, tells me in the next 2 weeks that they found a job in a community that is closer to home, then I change that person's salary and drop that salary to a bachelor's, you know, step 2 salary. I have to also, when reassessing the out-of-district costs, looking at where our students go. We have 2 students that may be going from a day school to a collaborative school, which is a different price. I have the day school in there, and I'm hoping that we can turn that to the collaborative, less restrictive environment with, you know, a plan for a student to eventually return to us. And then other things like reviewing, I haven't seen kindergarten enrollment. It was supposed to start today. The 3 people who were doing kindergarten enrollment in our Parent Information Center have COVID. So therefore, Parent Information Center was shut down, and one of the nurses also has COVID. So when we see those numbers and see how many students we have, if I have less than the average, I may not need 7 kindergarten teachers, I may only need 6, and 1 kindergarten teacher could, you know, take the place of a first grade teacher, or may not need to be refilled. Things of that nature. Preschool. You know, how many kids do we have in preschool? And whether or not we can expand our options for preschool to get any additional revenue out of that. So all of those moving parts, it's very usual and customary for that to be taking place right now. So how do you plan for that? You start with a budget reduction plan to get that $1.7 million deficit down. And I can say to you realistically, which is good in terms of when this budget gets approved, which I always thought was, you know, wicked late. But now it does give you, you know, a little bit more time. My goal would be to just continually update the committee between now and the end, you know, of probably May, to say, this is where we're at. And then be able to let you know what direction we're going to take, and if we need to make any reductions in force, reduction in staff. We have timelines that don't coincide with the budget process. It's very difficult to send out reduction in force notices because of the cultural impact that has and the flight or fight impact that has, so we want to try to avoid that at all costs. But there is still a little bit of time to massage this budget and see, you know, how we can bring that potential deficit down. The larger deficit, if you were looking at a needs-based budget, you know, do I think we can miraculously get a, what did we say it was, $3.2 million amount of money out of, you know, out of outside accounts and everything else? I don't. I do feel as though that is the budget that our students deserve, and we'll always advocate for that. Whether or not I don't get it every time is, you know, that's where I think, you know, a serious conversation around an override and what students need is definitely warranted. So I can't tell you that we need to sound the alarm now, but I think it's all in the pregame. I do think that we're not gonna survive the next year without an override. I can honestly tell you that. And I don't think it's premature to get people to start to gather, to be a part of that process and help create that narrative and an educational walk that needs to be had prior to having to do it. We can always set a date, but I don't want to set a date and then have to rally the troops, because that's where we get stuck with not providing enough education to the community for them to feel comfortable with the decision that they're making, if that is helpful.
And any follow-up question?
I guess I would just ask the rest of the committee sort of what their feelings are on this particular issue. My sense, this is just my personal sense, is that you were so good, Lisa, at making do with little, to the point that I think sometimes the urgency gets a little lost in some ways, because you're so good.
Well, I'm starting to panic, don't get me wrong. I am starting to panic. I am not looking at, I'm not at a full-out panic just yet for FY '25. FY '26, I can tell you, I will probably need some form of assistance. Maybe medication, but an override would probably be better.
Yeah, I guess it just feels like, shouldn't we start this, if we know this is coming, if like the tidal wave is coming, we see it coming, it's getting closer every year. I guess I just am getting a little nervous that we're not anticipating something that we know is coming and it's getting worse and worse. I don't know. Gus?
Yes.
So every year we ask for the needs. You know, as a school committee, you know, we're saddled with doing the best for the kids and trying to move everything forward. And that's why we ask. We know we're not gonna get it, but, and I don't like overrides, I don't. But I think at some point next year, or maybe even at some point this year for next year, we're gonna have to ask for an override. Now, it could be a level service override, because that's probably gonna happen for next year. Or it could be a needs-based override amount. But that's where that comes in about the parents and about the citizens, because they're the ones that are gonna make that decision. So they need to get involved, especially the parents, and decide what kind of education do you wanna give the kids? What kind of school department do you wanna have? And it goes, and Jimmy knows this because it's the rest of the town also, it's the police, fire, DPW. What do we wanna have? So we can have a level service amount of money to put in for an override, and that'll get you everything you have, you know, next year, this year for next year. Or you can say, we wanna have more for our kids. Like I said, I don't like overrides, but, and I've had them, I've been through them. We've won some, lost some. The citizens of this town are very gracious with the money they have. And I think they'd be gracious again. But that word has to get out, and it's to be explained. This unbelievable presentation, to me, really tells the story about what we need to move the district forward. And by getting involved, the citizens and the parents will be able to make that decision at the ballot box. So, but it's, I know we keep saying it, but next year it'll be it. It'll be it.
And I think when you use the word override, everybody goes into a hot panic, but, several years ago, the town flipped from each other to fund their departments, years ago, we're going back, 10 years ago.
15.
And, yeah, to really supporting each other. And I think the school department needs to be very clear, and my voice will be very clear, is I don't want an extra 50 cents if it means 50 cents less to the police department, fire department, or DPW. This is not a take from, and that only hurts other people. You can be a little bit good at a lot of things, which I think we are right now in Winthrop in terms of how we fund things. We fund everybody with a little bit, and we do with what we have. But if you start taking from people to give to other people, not only does it create deficits in other departments and less service in other departments, less safety, less response time, less infrastructure on our roads, it creates a cultural issue. I work every single day with the police department, almost every day with the fire department, and quite frequently with the town departments, DPW. And I can pick up the phone and call Steve Keller or Terry Delahanty or Scott, and we are so connected and work together so well because we're not in a position that we're, all vying for the same French fry on Revere Beach as seagulls. One fry, 10 people. Who's gonna get it? That is not a way to run the town. And so when we talk about overrides, I think we have to approach it from, we're talking about not taking money from police, not taking money from fire, not depleting services on the other side. And you may see them asking for additions too, and that's just fine. But I think advocating for, a commitment to fund your department, not at the risk of the other departments, is what an override is. It's not just begging, for additional money. Because the town could say, okay, well, cut 2 firefighters and, here you go. Now you got 100,000 to put 2 teachers in. That is not what we're looking for. We need the fire, police, and DPW.
I think the challenge that we have, is that you have, as Ms. Leonard pointed out, done very well with what we have. We have an excellent school system now. And so to say, but yet when we look ahead, this is not a luxury.
Yeah.
We have been able to do well because you have made good decisions and moved things around. But we're not, we're looking for social studies teachers. And
Yeah, we're on the struggle bus.
what we're not hearing is that is from the other teachers who are trying to fill in that gap.
Yeah.
which is not ideal.
Yeah.
So, and again, with the band and the Spanish and, a lot of these things, and I appreciate what Gus is saying about what kind of a school do we want to have? What kind of an education do we want to offer our children?
Sure.
And that's a fundamental question that we've got to answer here. Right now, we're not looking at layoffs. You've managed very well to avoid that, but it has been a lot of shifting around that people don't necessarily appreciate.
A lot of anxiety and a lot of last-minute decisions, which is super stressful, and not fun,
Yes.
One thing that I'm disappointed in is that the town allocation for FY '24 was $35,121,000, and the anticipated town appropriation for next year is $35,921,000. It's an $800,000 difference, but we're absorbing the increased health insurance costs, which is almost $600,000. So the difference in the town allocation from this school year to next school year really is $200,000, but that's not how much it's going to cost, the increase in cost to educate our students, and I do want to make that point because this isn't how the budget has been done historically with this 60-40 split. It's been looked at a little bit more individually, so I'm really disappointed in these numbers, just looking at what the numbers are at face value. And I'm curious to see what those town expenses that are now being divided into the school district, whether they're itemized employee by employee or whether they're looked at as a 60-40 split, and what that means and the impact on our students. I also want to see how the Chapter 70 money is being handled, because historically we've gotten the Chapter 70 money, and I'm curious to see if the Chapter 70 money is now going to be split 60-40, because that feels unfair to our students as well.
Yeah, and the Chapter 70 money, FY '23 to FY '24 was the largest increase in Chapter 70 money that's ever been. So that's when the state, in its wisdom, decided to make an adjustment to Chapter 70. They did not correct it, they actually didn't do much. But it was a $1.7 million increase, which was, I think, 23% or somewhat increase in money from one year to another. Prior years, it was minimal, 0.8%, 0.4%. This year, we're looking at, I believe it's about a $320,000 increase in Chapter 70 from last year to this year. So that huge bump that took place 2 years ago, 1.7 million, was a big addition in terms of money allocated for schools. You're not gonna see that again, but to your point, that 60.
Right, we're not seeing a 320.
Right. Agreed.
Yes, Mr. Martucci.
I mean, it's a great point, because, historically, we never had these shared costs. The town always paid them. Never came out of it, but I think it's a great thing to show how much the school department needs to run, because those are costs associated with the schools. But historically, we've gotten these $600,000, $800,000, $900,000, not figures, as a increase in budget, but we never paid any extra in those lines, those shared costs. But now, here we are, and we're being, burdened with those costs going up, but we're not seeing any increase to pay them. We're seeing a normal increase from the town so far. There may be some more money there they can give us, we don't know. I mean, like our budget, their budget's the same thing.
Mhm.
It's a moving target. The state aid, cherry sheet, that all changes with the wind, so, and then, of course, local receipts, other items that are involved in coming up with their revenue, it's the same thing. So, it could change, hopefully it does, maybe it won't, but we hope for the best.
And I think when we talk about what we know and what we expect and what we didn't know or what we didn't expect, those are some of the things. I always like to put out there what we did know, because you have to be clear about what you knew. Like, we knew when we got COVID money, if we put it all into salaries, we were gonna be in a major funding cliff in 3 years that we could never come out of. So we didn't do that. We knew when we took the accounting, of those numbers, that it was gonna reflect in our budget. What didn't seem to be very clear to the committee was that now the increase in those costs were gonna be part of a traditional $600,000 to $800,000 increase in a school's budget. When you think about that, and again, it's not a person doing this, or it's based on the income to the town, the 2.5%. So it all ties into, when you need an override, why? why do you need that? What's the why? The why is because we can only go up 2.5%. Clearly, the cost of education and anything, including milk and toilet paper, is more than 2.5%.
Right.
And so eventually, you cannot sustain yourself any longer.
Right. From the town's perspective, I would point out that it's a proposal, and,
Right.
and that is part of what FinCom is doing now. So that's why, again, it is important for the public to get involved, to understand this is what we anticipate the town giving us, but this is not set in stone, and this has not been approved, and this has not been, it's not a final number, it's a flexible, and that's where it's important for, if we want education, like, if education's a priority, then that discussion needs to be had, and
Sure.
people need to be heard on that, or speak up about that. Mr. Lettieri?
I think it's important to know, too, when we talk about 800,000, the town's new income as of now is little under 1.5 million, of which the proposal is that the school gets 60% of that money, and the town gets 40% of that money. If health insurance was on the town side and the town's budget went up 600, the school probably would have got 300. And, it's not, and again, going back to what the superintendent said, we're not pitting anybody against one another, because that doesn't solve anything. The bottom line is, in the last 4 years of this country, the inflation has been rampant. We've seen a high of almost 10% and still hovering around 5%. And we take in 2.5% extra. I mean, a gallon of gas 4 years ago was $2 and change. Now it's approaching $4 again, and was as high as almost $5. The bottom line is prices are going up faster than we're having income come in, and there needs to be an adjustment. It's not really pitting one against the other. It's educating the community as to what we need and how to best get it. We're gonna vote on a budget of either showing a $2.8 million deficit or a budget showing a $1.7 million deficit. None of those budgets are probably gonna come to fruition. And on the town side, we don't have that luxury. We have to vote on a balanced budget, right? It has to be balanced. We can't vote on a budget that's 2.8 million in the hole or 1.7 million in the hole. Gus brought up a lot of good points too. There's still some moving targets out there. But again, the economy's crappy, which leads to people not buying a ton of new cars, which leads to local receipts from excise taxes not going up at the rate we'd like it to go up. Our hope is with the state that, when the final numbers come out, we get a little bit more than we're anticipating. But again, to give the schools more than that 60 is taking it away from somebody. It's like, we tell everybody you can make any kind of adjustments on a budget you want, but it has to be a debit and it has to be a credit. You can't just give money without taking it away from someplace else. So it's, it's not a discussion to me to get upset about. It's a discussion to say, hey, let's roll up our pants, and the superintendent is as competitive as anybody and wants to be able to show people, hey, this is the truth. And 15 years ago, when we went for an override, we did it 18 years ago, and it was horrific because we just threw out a number and didn't really put a lot of effort, it seemed, into it. And then 15 years ago, we did a menu, we educated the heck out of everybody, and like Gus said earlier, the town is very responsive. If they're proven, if they feel that they know where the money's going and what it's needed for, they will support you. It only benefits them too. It benefits them in property values, it benefits them in children's education, it benefits the whole town and the future of the town. They just want to understand the process, and that's our job. You can't blame people for doing something you don't want them to do if you don't explain to them in detail why this money's needed. This budget explains that in incredible detail. And the fact that, again, this has to be an education, that this needs to be an ongoing process, not every year, but every 5 or 6 or 7 years, that, the reality is you're gonna need a little bit more money than that 2.5%. It stinks, but it's reality. I mean, you could argue with it all you want, but it's fact. Our job, I think, is to educate people and to try to get people to come in here and try to get people who are interested in getting educated and then sharing that information. All we want is the truth out. We don't want fiction. We just want the truth. But people have to understand as to why and realize that it just can't we're not gonna get another 2.8 million, we're just not. We're not gonna get another 1.7 million, we're not, it's not there. So we have to make some decisions as to how we fix this for fiscal '26, because I do think Lisa is right. I think the superintendent's right once again, where, she's gonna sharpen her pencil and do everything humanly possible to see how we can get through fiscal '25. She has contractual obligations just by, to notify people potentially. I mean, there were years way back when there'd be 30, 50 pink slips brought out. Now, a lot of those people, we were fortunate enough to be able to bring them back, but the timing of everything is in a way that you don't really vote on the budget before contractually you have to let people know you might not have a job next year. We don't want to do that. I know Lisa doesn't want to do that.
Not
nor does
during the
Shannon.
time of a teacher shortage, when people will run faster than they've ever run
Right,
before.
exactly. There's just so many opportunities out there for teachers. The last thing you want to do is say, hey, you might not have a job, even though you think they're going to. You don't want to be put in that position. So I know Lisa's going to do everything she can, look at every account imaginable and see what we could do to make it level for next year. But we're all just pie
And
in
that
the
takes
sky.
time too, because I don't want people to think like you find money. It's not a matter of me like
No,
finding.
no.
I know where every single penny is, unfortunately, and pull spreadsheets up at 2 a.m. when I wake up, and I don't even need to open my computer.
Right.
It's a matter of giving us the time to continue to flush it out, and then when we can't, being understanding of why we can't, and then what is the impact of that. And I think that education is gonna be huge, and I do agree that starting now, me, it's all about the pregame and the practice to get to the end of where you need to be.
Any further comment? Yes, Mr. Purinton.
Kind of a shift from everything we've been talking about, but.
You're writing a check.
Kidding me? I don't have that kind. The line for grant-funded salary and expenses.
Yep.
The increase up by 1.3+ million.
Yes.
Is that all secured?
So, yes, and I'm, just for a little bit of a better explanation on that, and I may not have been fully clear before. In this year's budget, there are certain things that were not reflected, and again, my mission was to get every heartbeat into this budget. So, for instance, school lunch employees and school lunch contracts. We have not reflected those directly in the budget in terms of people that we pay and where we pay them from.
Okay.
And so, school lunch, because thankfully is free, we actually get more in reimbursement now than we ever have in the past.
Okay.
Because all students are free, and because we push making sure kids eat lunch. So, money comes in in a revolving way, so, a reimbursement way, into the school's coffers and sits in a school lunch account. And that money is used to pay all the cooking staff, the Aramark staff, about $385,000 worth of staffing, or $345,000 worth of staffing. So you've never really seen that come out of the budget. And so what's happened in schools across the state of Massachusetts is because it's become free, that pot of money that schools have, which they used to keep aside for when a refrigerator went down, when a stove went down, when new tables needed to be bought, they would keep a small amount of money in that account to be able to cover those funds, as well as pay their staff. Those accounts have been building across the state. So for us, not building as high, because we're not as big a school as many of the others, but the state, in its wisdom, which is pretty much how they roll, has said you can only use that money for things directly related to school lunch. Okay, so that's paying school cafeteria workers, buying furniture for the cafeteria, fixing stoves and things of the like. My intent with that money is to use it for that purpose, because if you can't use it for anything else, it just sits there, which is sort of a waste when you're 1.7 in the hole. But we have to get creative. So when we talk about finding other ways of finding money to help offset our revenue problem, some smart man at one point in time said, the community does not have a spending issue, it has a revenue issue. If you look at the expenses in our budget and you look at the teachers compared to class size and the number of teachers we have, there is no spending problem. We're 85% salaries. In this budget, you can tie every human to a classroom, what they teach and how many kids are in that classroom. So there's no overage of people. We're not loaded with administration or extra people. Our expenses are, for this year, $4 million and change. out of a $40 million budget. I mean, that's low, so we're not overspending on expenses. So we have to become creative. So how can you be creative in accessing that account? Well, maybe the people who monitor the kids at lunch, that we pay $20,000 in one school, can now be taken out of the LEA budget and placed in that revolving account.
Okay.
Can they? I met with an auditor, he tells me, not really. However, what's their job description? I'm gonna make sure they're making sure kids have balanced meals and that they're not throwing out food that can be recycled. And that if a kid doesn't have a meal, that they're being reported so that we can get them a meal. And that they're teaching them how to chew, making sure they're eating their food and not getting up. To me, that's directly related to school lunch. So that's a creative way to reduce your deficit and put it in a revolving account if you can. I'm sure there's some type of revolving account police that will come from the lunch department, but those are the avenues that we take when we talk about digging deeper. Increasing preschool enrollment. If I can get $15,000 more by adding more students, and I have the room for them, then I will do that, as long as I don't have to pay $30,000 for another instructional aide to balance the room. So those are all the things that we're working on now, if that helps. So that's some of the money that's in those line items. I've also dug deeper into the I-20 account for the level service budget. So we used to take 2 salaries out of that. Next year, I anticipate more kids coming in. There may be excess money in there. I'll take 3. By the end of the school year, I might be able to take 4. It's gonna depend upon the balance of that account. Once you wipe all those accounts out, you talk about the need for an override. Once all that stuff is gone, you have no place to go.
Just a
Yes,
quick
another
suggestion. So we're talking a lot about, we need to get the town involved, we need to get the word out. I kind of am wondering if we need to like start having some meetings, not just calling them like a budget meeting, but calling like them a meeting about what's going on with the school budget, and have Lisa there and have some of us there. We have the authority to do that, right, Jen?
I believe we do.
Okay.
A meeting with PTOs.
Right,
And-
so I
which
guess
we've
what
done,
I'm saying is, I
but
think
more.
part of this is just honestly a messaging issue,
Yeah.
because I've been thinking about all these things we can't control, right? And I kind of feel like, Lisa, stop working so hard to like find every penny, like, we need to sound the bells, I think, a little, not that you should not be working
No,
hard. I
and
don't
we've
mean to-
started that.
Like, you are wonderful, but I also feel like we as a committee have a responsibility.
Sure.
We can't just sit here and say we need to get the town involved. We actually
I'd
have to,
appreciate
like,
the
have some
activism
meetings
as much as we
and
can.
invite the town and let them know what's going on, and have you present the budget, and have us really talk about what's going on, and, call a meeting, like a meeting for that purpose, not just like come to our regular school committee meeting,
Right,
which,
right.
let's be honest, people aren't gonna do.
Right. So we have started some of that by talking to the PTOs and reaching out to some individual constituents in the town that I know, are willing to start to build that. So I think what we can do is I can reach out more to them and say, hey, will you put together a meeting and bring people together? I'm happy to attend it. I believe only, you can't have a quorum there, so we'd have to be very cautious about if school committee members attended, what that would look like, and start to get that messaging out. We do have shockingly, I have a strategic plan for overrides that I borrowed from someone and that Julie Barry actually helped me with, that gives you sort of a layout of how to do it. So I can pull that, now that this is done, I can pull that up and then have some follow-up conversation with members about taking that next step.
We'll do a budget show with CAT.
John Massaro is already on
Right.
he's already reached out to me to sit down and do a WCAT where he can ask me questions about, what the needs are. So he's willing to do that. Did he tell you that?
No,
Oh.
but it's a good
Yeah,
idea.
and he's good at it.
Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, can I have a roll call, please?
Oh, that's me again. All right, hold on. My new hat on. Okay, so this is the motion on approving
Needs-based.
needs-based budget. Ms. Leonard?
Yes.
Mr. Lettieri?
No.
Mr. Matucci?
Yes.
Ms. Petrie?
Yes.
Mr. Purinton?
Yes.
Ms. Barry is not here. Ms. Powell?
Yes. Motion passes.
Yes.
Superintendent's report.
You just got it. I apologize. I'd love to fill you in on,
That was a good, that was a
all
good
the games
superintendent's report.
and April vacation, which I didn't take, so Not that I have April vacation, but I have no more.
Okay, homeschool applications tonight,
No, we do not have any.
and we have a posting.
We have a posting, which is, I believe it is, so this is for the special education chairperson at the Arthur T. Cummings School. That position has been opened all year and partially filled by a retired special education chairperson. There's absolutely a need to fill that position, which I could go into, but you don't want to listen to me for an hour. So we are asking to continue to fill that position for next year, and it is in the level service budget.
Okay. No new business,
None.
public relations.
Just a few things that you had in your packet. There will be, the Middle School Drama Society is putting on When Bad Things Happen to Good Actors, which is a short comedy. That's gonna be on May 3rd and May 4th at 7 o'clock. Tickets are $5 at the Neil Shapiro Center. You can check the middle school website about getting those tickets. The Arthur T. Cummings PTO is doing a Mother's Day raffle. You can win the ultimate gift basket, which is a whole bunch of stuff from getting your nails done, to getting your hair done, to going to Robin's Nest. I'll skip over the Calzone 5 exercise classes, because I won't be at those. So you can Venmo at ATC-PTO, or you could go and check out the ATC's news page, and you can get involved in that. And then CASA's annual Youth Award nomination, that's posted on our website. They want you to nominate youth and their supporters for this sort of overall award ceremony, which is not taking place until May 22nd at the Elks. But they'd like folks to go on and nominate. That's also on our website, so if you want to nominate anyone, you may do so. And that is it.
Any other public relations tonight? Hearing none, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion. Second.
Motion by Ms. Petrie, second by Ms. Leonard. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition or abstention? Hearing none, motion passes. Meeting is adjourned.